Hi, I'm Alyssa Schmidt, and I'm going to be talking about weekly readers. I chose to talk about this topic because it brings current news happening around the world and nation to the perspective of young elementary students. Weekly readers also get students to be more involved in the news and encourages them to keep up with what is happening around with the news as they grow up. A major contributor was Eleanor Johnson. She was the founder of the first weekly reader. She was also an educator in Pennsylvania before she started My Weekly Reader. Johnson believed that students were missing knowledge and the understanding of the real world around them. About My Weekly Reader. The first weekly reader was published in 1928 by the American Education Publications. In a very short time, My Weekly Reader became widely known for its quality and integrity. The first weekly reader was such a success that it was in high demand to have additional editions made for the other elementary grade levels. By 1930, all grade levels had weekly readers that were geared towards the different elementary grades. In 2007, the Weekly Reader Corporation became part of Reader's Digest. In a few years in 2012, Scholastic took over My Weekly Reader and rebranded to Scholastic News/Weekly Reader. The goal of Weekly Reader was to bring awareness to students of what was happening in the world and that they will one day become daily newspaper readers. The Weekly Reader was cleverly dispersed every Friday to give both students and teachers a welcoming break from classwork. The first My Weekly Reader. The first weekly reader that was published covered the presidential election of 1928, and it was made for the fourth grade students. The presidential candidates in the election were Hubert Hoover and Alfred E. Smith. The headline of the article said, "Two poor boys who made good are now running for the highest office in the world." The article focused on the backstories of the candidates and their childhood. The weekly reader also allowed the students to participate in their own presidential election. Historical significance. In the early days of My Weekly Reader, it was the students' primary source of news before the television was invented. Walter Carpenter conducted a study on several events that were covered by the Weekly Reader, such as the Great Depression, World War II, the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster, and the Iraq War. Carpenter found a recurring pattern in how negative events are portrayed. The Weekly Reader tended to avoid negative events until it was not possible to avoid, and was widely reported by the media. When Weekly Reader talked about negative events, it was introduced gradually, and taking action and doing something was highly emphasized. By doing this, the writers of Weekly Reader were putting their own positive spin on the event. Some important events that have been covered by Weekly Reader was the Great Depression, World War II, the Cold War, assassinations, the Vietnam War, civil rights struggles, and the Iran hostage crisis, and presidential elections. Weekly Reader portrayals of people. When Weekly Reader would talk about leaders that were portrayed or described, they were portrayed or described as famous or great or high-ranking government officials. Heroes are often portrayed as wearing uniforms and people risking their lives to help save other people. Also, themes of cultural identity and ideology can be seen as an assumption to loyalty of the state, loyalty used on America's greatness and shield values. Development and education. A different take on weekly readers would be News to You. News to You is a weekly newspaper that brings current events to students with autism and special needs. It started in 1997. Weekly Reader has since developed into a magazine and is now offered to students online. Contribution to education. The purpose of My Weekly Reader was to help improve students' reading skills and helping develop responsible citizenship through current events. When students experience new ideas through current events, they not only build comprehension and context relative to their community and world, they also develop new critical thinking and communication skills by forming and expressing opinions about what they are learning. By staying informed about current events, students are preparing to become productive citizens in the life outside of the classroom. And here are my sources.